Before we get this show started, let's hear from our sponsor. Angler's Coffee roasts a full range of coffees with one goal in mind, delivering excellent coffee to every single angler. And I'm one of those anglers who loves Angler's Coffee. Great tasting, robust, and good to go. And if you haven't noticed, this is Dave from the Wet Fly Swing podcast. I'm here because I'm good friends with Greg, and we are both supporting a great coffee company, and you should too. Angler's Coffee just released a new subscription program, and you can get 22% off, not just 20% off. We're going the extra distance here. 22% off of this box and all products at anglerscoffee.com. Just use the coupon code FFI20 at checkout to get 22% off of great coffee today. That's anglerscoffee.com.
Hey, what's up, listeners? Before we begin today's podcast, just a bit of housekeeping here for you. An amazing announcement that I want to make sure that you guys are definitely aware of. So, the first thing is on Stillwater School. We have a Stillwater School program this year at Skacheen Lodge in beautiful British Columbia. So, for anyone that's ever wanted to learn Stillwater, this is the place. And your instructor is the one and only Phil Rowley. He and I have teamed up. We've partnered up to bring you guys a in-person, on-water, Stillwater School, and that's from June 24th to the 27th at the lovely and beautiful Skacheen Lodge out in British Columbia. So basically, if you've ever wondered, about the Stillwater fishery and how it works, the insect life, the lake life, different tactics, from subsurface to surface to indicator fishing, all that sort of stuff. Of course, Phil will do his fly tying as well, and what flies work for each time of the year and everything like that works on the Stillwater topic. So making sure that goes with you guys as well. So one of the really cool things is the lodge itself. I mean, it's $1,600 per person. It includes everything you can possibly think of, except for your fishing license. You're going to have to buy that on the government website. So all your meals, all your drinks, all your boats, rod fees, all that sort of stuff at the lodge is taken care of. The lodge offers 5-star food, super nice, beautiful setting, beautiful lodge. The accommodations are great. I can say this because I have been there, and that's why we're going back, because it's the perfect setting. It's perfect lodge. There's beautiful wild Kamloops rainbow trout in the lakes there. There's over 16 lakes. Each of them have their own private boat on them. So if you're out, you're fishing, you want to take after the course, you want to go and fish your own private water, that's totally possible to do so. These are amazing. Like, I can guarantee you're not going to see another person on that lake. So it's just you and a friend or your partner, or whoever it is that you want to bring with you, if anyone. And it's just to have a lake by yourself, to smash these massive rainbows that just fight like tanks. It's so wonderful. So again, that's June 24th to the 27th. It's a 4-day, 3-night program. It's at Skacheen Lodge in beautiful Kamloops, British Columbia, and it's also, Phil Rowley and I are putting that on. So again, that's the Stillwater School. One of the ways, if you guys are interested in learning more about this program or doing this program, and it is going to fill out because we only are limiting it to 12 people, is to reach out to me via DM, reach out to the lodge, that's Skacheen, SKITCHINE, lodge.com, and sign up for the Stillwater School there. Or, of course, you could always reach out to Phil Rowley, flyfishing.com as well as another option. So these are all great opportunities. It is going to go fast. Make sure you get yourself in there. So I'm looking forward to seeing you. It's, again, like I said, an amazing opportunity if you've ever wanted to learn Stillwater, or if you do know Stillwater and you do want to brush up on some skills and learn from one of the Stillwater pioneers and legends, Phil Rowley. All right, guys, let's get back to the show. Hey, fly fishing insiders, we are here with Togen's Fly Shop, as well as Justin and Stanton are back. Hey guys, Justin, what's the latest rage in the Stillwater scene going on with Togen's?
For this year, we have our crawny skin. It's been a staple for the last few years for chronomid fishing. We have it both available in holographic as well as the regular crawny skin colors. You might have seen the blue steel color floating around. It's quite popular.
Awesome. Stanton, as a pro team tire, tell us about the crawny skins and how it applies to the flies.
The Crawny skins are fantastic. You can use them as wrapping your whole body over your chironomid and then wrapping your wire materials around it for your ribs. Or what I really like to do with it is I put a thread body down and I use the Crawny skin as a rib with wire, and it makes a really cool 3D segmented effect. And you can also use them, what I've used them for is some of my Euro nips, and I've used them as a body and then wrapped vinyl B-rib over top, and it creates this excellent looking nymph that really pops under the water. So it's a fantastic product.
I love it. And Justin, where can we find these products?
You can find both versions of the Crawny skin on our website at togansflyshop.com.
Excellent. Let's get back to the show. Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Keenan. This is Season 3 of the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. In this episode, we aim to bring you the biggest and best stories from those who work and make our fly fishing industry truly great. The Fly Fishing Insider Podcast dives deep into the past, present, and future of all our guests, uncovering their amazing stories and journey. Join us each week as we interview a new podcast guest. Also, if you're new to the show or not yet a subscriber, make sure you hit subscribe after this episode. Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Today our guest, Matt Martin. Matt, how's it going?
Hey Greg, I'm doing really well. How are you doing this winter?
Doing well. Can't wait till the winter's over, my friend. Definitely can't wait till it's over. So, I am excited that you're here because we're going to talk today about a topic that doesn't, especially with myself, that I don't really know too much about, and that's catching carp on the fly. And I mean, to me, it's this, this whole fishery is kind of exploding. It's kind of on the verge of exploding. There's so much going on and so much mystery and so much education surrounding it because, not a lot of people are doing it, but a lot of people are interested in doing it. Does that make sense? So
definitely.
I think we're going to debunk that today. And I'm really, really excited to talk about that with you, Matt. So, but before we begin, jumping right into all the tips and techniques and all the awesome ways to catch carp on the fly, tell us how you got into fly fishing.
Yeah, growing up here in central Ontario, fishing's always been a major part of my childhood. Predominantly at first, I was a gear angler, introduced to it by my grandparents and my father. I spent a lot of time on the water, but then in later years of elementary school, I had a friend of mine introduced me to a fly rod, and it's kind of been an addiction ever since. I think the aspect of creating your own flies. Being able to customize them to the water that you're fishing was just one of those, addicting aspects of fly angling. Ever since then, it's been fully immersed into it. I started off chasing the little resident brook trout we have in our creeks all around here in Ontario, and then learned progressively that I can catch pretty much any species that would take a lure. Will definitely eat a fly if presented properly.
Yeah, of course. I do like that. I agree with that. Any species will. But what I wanted to focus in on here is your involvement. Like, so you've transitioned from learning how to tie and learning how to catch fish to now guiding, and you have a guiding operation as well. And we were talking off air briefly, and you mentioned that you refired that app due to as a supplementary income and during COVID, back when you were allowed to have guests and stuff like that, which is really cool. So when you're taking clients guiding, are you specifically targeting every fish, or are you specifically targeting carp on the fly?
Yeah, so I'm one of the few guides here in Southern Ontario that does offer a carp guide service. I offer services for, resident trout, our lake run rainbows, as well as smallmouth. But I do have quite an building interest in chasing carp. I've been doing it, personally myself for about 10 years on a fly rod. But it seems like you mentioned in the last couple of years, it's really started to boom. I think now with the advent of, all these books and podcasts such as this coming out, people are really starting to look into what's in their backyard. Even more so now that travel's restricted. And there's, myself included, I have all this gear all this money invested in saltwater gear, and you can't really use it. Knowing that gear is perfect for chasing these giant, some people call them golden bones, on our local flats. It's pretty amazing. There's not many fish in freshwater that will, not only are super spooky, that live in shallow water that you sight fish for, that will also put you into your backing multiple times during the fight, and can grow well over 30 pounds, like the ones we see in our Great Lakes Basin.
Crazy. I love it. Let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about how you target these massive fish.
Sure.
And even not massive fish. Like where would they get started? And I mean, obviously equipment, and you just mentioned about saltwater gear. In my mind's like, holy crap, I got a ton of saltwater gear sitting around, like you said. I hate to say it, collecting dust because I haven't used it in a year and a half. Is that what I would use? Like my saltwater fly lines and all that sort of stuff? Is that what I would use?
What?
Yeah.
It's so specific to each region. Here in the Great Lakes region, we do have, some of the largest carp in the country. Like I said, it's quite regular seeing fish while you're out. You might not catch them every time, but over 30 pounds. The biggest one we've put the net under last year was just over 35 pounds. And that's something that you sight fished for in something maybe 12 to 14 inches of water. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. So I do use heavier gear. I target fish with, a 9-foot 8 weight is kind of your best all around. But in the heavy cover that I fish, and we'll talk about that some more, I often even bump up to a 10 weight. Now, in some of the, farm ponds that we have in the area, even as simple as in your neighborhood stormwater pond, there's carp often. And, those fish might average 3 to 4 pounds. A 5 weight is more than enough. So even your, smaller fish, your trout gear would work just fine.
Interesting. Okay. So it's just dependent upon the size of the fish and what you're targeting for sure. So
definitely.
So like for gear, you're suggesting, what's it called? Like typical standard trout gear, but what else? Is there anything else specific that you would need for trout? Like, I mean, particularly flies, if we're looking at flies. Like,
sure.
Like walk us through. Yeah.
Sure. So I'll speak to, to the area that I predominantly fish. And that's where we're seeing a huge growth in carp anglers is the Great Lakes. So the northern shore of Lake Ontario and the southern shore of Georgian Bay are the two areas that I spend a lot of time fishing. Those fish, like I said, get quite large. So I'm going to say your best all around rod is, like I said, a 9-foot 8 weight. You can, in open water, definitely fish with a 7 weight. However, keep in mind, these are big lakes with high winds. So having something that's got a little bit more punch is definitely, of interest to you. For gear, I keep it very much similar to saltwater. So, my favorite line is anything that's like a cool water saltwater line, like a redfish line is something I use. I think I use the Rio redfish taper. It's really weight forward, creates a nice, quick, accurate cast. You don't have to apply a ton of power to it, which is nice. So, and then on that, I usually run starting off with like a 9-foot 0x tapered leader. Sometimes on those super sunny days, you might need to lengthen it to a 12-foot.
Okay.
And then on other days when it's super windy, and you've got that chop on the water and you can't quite see the fish, it's better to go with a shorter leader to get those accurate casts.
Interesting. Are carp like leader shy at all?
They're more, I'd say, line shy than leader shy. Just like a big bonefish or a permit, you don't want to cast your fly line over their backs, but you do. You want to lead them, cast in front of them if they're moving. But the leader itself, not so much. Oftentimes, with like a 9-foot leader, my fly line will land, 4 or 5 feet closer to me than the fish, and then my fly will hopefully drop within that 2-foot kind of radius of the fish's head. So while it sinks, I can then strip it into its feeding zone. But yeah, so they're not, I don't say 2 liter shy because my tippet, I'll run, minimum, I'd say 12 pound tippet, sometimes 15 pound in the heavy cover.
Okay. So let's talk about that next. So like, are carp, like, let's say you cast your fly, let's say you cast up short, are carp likely to turn their head out of curiosity and hit a fly, even if it's casted up slightly short of where you're trying to go?
Definitely. They have a relatively small feeding window. So they don't have the best eyesight. They've got a very strong lateral line. And then they even, when they spook, they even release a pheromone into the water that will cause the other carp in the area to spook as well, which is quite crazy. We can talk more about that.
I've seen that. I've seen that.
It's absolutely wild. You honestly just have to stand still for 15, 20 minutes and let them reset. Don't take a step type thing. So the whole goal, there's a technique that a lot of, well-known carp anglers, one that comes to mind straight away is Dan Fraser. He has invented this drag and drop technique, which is casting beyond your target. And then similar to, let's say you're casting to rising trout in a small stream. You cast, and you're noticing that your fly line's not drifting in the right feeding lane for them. Sometimes you'll lift, slightly upstream and towards yourself to pull that dry fly, skate it towards you. Mm-hmm. Similar for feeding for these carp. If you drop a fly right on them, unless it's an unweighted fly, chances are they're going to spook. But if you cast, the goal is to cast, I'd say 3 or 4 feet beyond their head, and then almost immediately after your fly line hits the water, just give it a lift, over your right shoulder if you're right-handed, and skate that fly across the surface, and then just let it sink right into their feeding zone. The big trick with carp is they almost have a dead zone right in front of their nose that they can't quite see. So if you put a fly in front of them, they're likely not going to see it. The goal is to put it off slightly in front of one eye or the other. So off to the left or the right.
Interesting.
And if you can get it within 4 to 6 inches, and it's a slow enough fall, you're likely going to get bit, or at least it's going to give you some attention.
Okay, cool. Now let's say you get bit. Let's say, I did that, I cast it, I did everything that you just said, I get bit. Now, do I trout set? Do I strip set? Do I, how do you?
Great question.
Yeah, because, their mouth is different. It's quick. It's in and out. Yeah. Yeah,
there's two. You could do either, right? And that's the tough thing. You'll be out in the salt and they're always talking about they'll be like, the guys like strip, long strip. And that's just to get you to do your strip set without trout setting. I would say that strip setting is very important when you're at a distance. So if your fish is feeding at 20, 30, 40 feet away and it eats, the strip set's going to be your best bet because, that way you're only moving the fly 6 or 8 inches, giving the fish an opportunity, if for whatever reason you set too early, to chase it down and maybe eat it again. However, a lot of this is quite close combat. Mm-hmm. And when you're up in heavy cover for them, you're fishing in bulrushes and Phragmites weeds, which is like a plague out here, kind of all over North America. Those carp get they're quite easy to approach as long as you take your time. And I would say your best chance of hooking a fish is if you can get within that 15-foot range of the fish. It's less fly line on the water. It's a light presentation with not much of a splash when your fly enters the water. Mm-hmm. If you get a fish to eat then, it's going to be a trout set because it's practically underneath your rod tip.
Yeah, exactly. You look at you're standing there and you got a 9-foot rod in your hand. You've just shortened it 10 feet. So we're talking a 5-foot difference.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then it's all about, hold on. If you have open water and you're fishing on a rocky flat with small boulders and rubble, you're going to let them run. They're going to take line. If you're fishing this heavy cover, and people can, take a look at my Instagram after and they can see some of the cover we're fishing these fish in. Mm-hmm. It's heavier than any largemouth cover, you would think of fishing. It's pretty much almost a lock drag, just enough to let them shake their head and not let the fly pull out as you try to navigate them out of the heavy cover into something more open to let them run at that point. They're always going to need to run. It's just a matter of trying to control that situation when you first hook up.
No, let's talk about the run. That's the fun part. So
it is
the run. I have heard the expression, carp fishing, you like to see backing. That is necessarily, I'm assuming that's true. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you have if the water body you're fishing has the room for the fish to run, you will definitely see your backing on almost every fish.
Wow.
Even a 5 or 6 pounder in open water will surprise you at how hard it'll pull on a 7 or an 8 weight. So you'll be well into your backing. If you hook into one of our average fish, which are 15 to 17, 18 pounds, you're going to be in your backing likely 2 to 3 times before you get a net under it. The big thing there is having the right reel that can manage not only having a drag that can handle that kind of pressure, because most guys in freshwater, unless you steelhead fish where you're going to see your backing often, or at least a powerful run, are going to have gear or reels that might not be quite up to the task.
Yeah.
So making sure you have a reel that, again, is relatively like saltwater compatible. I like sealed drags, these reels, even though we're freshwater, you are going to be dropping your reel in the water. It might get in the sand and muck. So having a sealed drag is super important. But most importantly, something with a mid arbor, if not a large arbor, and lots of backing. And the more backing you have, the more line you pull in per turn when that fish is running back at you, which they often like to do. They'll run out, they'll take 50, 100 feet of backing, if not more, and then they'll just turn around and sprint right back at you. There's so many times you often have to, almost run backwards to keep up on the tension.
Interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
Is that just programmed in them, or why do you think they do that? Why would they run away from their target and then run back? I'm asking you because I literally just don't know.
Yeah, me either. Really off the top of my head, I would think, they are in flight mode, right? They're hooked. They don't know what's going on. They're feeling pressure. They try one direction. I'm still feeling that pressure. They try the other. I don't know if that's quite true or not.
That's possible.
But just trying to outmaneuver whatever's pulling them in that direction. The key with them, though, if you're fishing in bottom that doesn't have large boulders, is make sure you're playing the fish on a low angled rod. If you're having your rod way up in the air, you're high sticking these fish. I've seen more than a couple rods break, especially when someone's winching in a fish and then it decides to take off on a blistering run. If you have a low angle, it's a little bit more forgiving to your rod. Also, you can apply more pressure and tire these fish out quicker by changing the angle of your rod, by pulling their head one way or another.
Sideways,
and that's super important. Otherwise, you could be locked into a battle if you're fighting them incorrectly for over 30 minutes. And these are carp; they're tough fish, but they're also not as tough as everyone gives them credit for. They prefer cooler water. I practice keep them wet principles just like you would anything else, any other trout species. People, think of them oftentimes as, a garbage fish. They're not really worth it.
I was just going to get into all that later. Yeah.
Yeah. We see guys out here even, bow fishing for them. In Ontario, it's legal. You can shoot them with a compound bow. Now there's a short season for that. With me, it's like these things deserve my respect. They're a serious adversary. They're hard to catch, and a lot of people think they're easy to catch. That's the one thing. When you first get people out with the fly rod, it's nothing to present to 30 or 40 fish in a day and have one fish take maybe.
Wow, interesting.
Even for a good angler, they're very tuned into their surroundings. They operate in kind of a pack, like I was mentioning. When one spooks, the whole group will spook. They're actually incredibly smart, and it's quite a challenge to get one bite, no matter the size.
Interesting. So now here's the thing too, and it's like I know what you're saying, like they spook and stuff like that. But there's a particular beach. There's a lake in right around my house. It's called Skaha Lake in Penticton, British Columbia. I live in Kelowna, and I mean, we go there in the summertime because the beaches they're sandy bottoms, like you said, that 12 to 14 inches of water. There's just packs and packs of carp. And I mean, the people are feeding them bread and hot dogs, whatever, right? Like kids are dropping ice cream, and the carp are just thrashing about. And I mean, as much as you say they spook, they spook because you can't catch one with your hand or you can't step on one. But they spook, but then they come right back like instantly. Yeah. I don't know if they're smart enough to say, okay, well, there's humans here. There's there's a consistent food source because somebody is dropping their Tim Hortons, right?
Totally.
I mean, I don't know, but like these are, and I've often looked at it, go, man, like I think I'd like to target these fish. Obviously not when people are fishing, but
for sure.
In other times, like right now, no one's at the beach, right? It's, it's where we March and no one's at the beach. And, like, is that a prime time to target these fish? Is it an opportunity to target? There's so much carp within our lakes out here as well, in the channels and the canals. That again, it's like I look at these massive, like you said, these massive fish, and I'm like, no one's hitting them. It's an untapped fishery. Like, is this something that's worth my time to do as a fly fisher? That's like literally like 5 minutes from my house.
And that sounds like an amazing spot to go catch a few carp. You know what? There are, maybe like you were mentioning, they're feeding on, anything people are dropping in, French fries or ice cream, whatever. There are actually fly patterns that are designed to imitate bread, right? Like people are spinning deer hair on a hook and clipping it into a round shape to make it look like a piece of bread or a dog biscuit or something that these fish people will feed them. Now they sound almost a little bit domesticated in a sense.
That's what I'm wondering.
They're used to people. They're used to the fact that nobody's hurt them at this point. Nobody's tried to hook them. So you might actually have a pretty easy accessible fishery like right there to start. Now I imagine over the course of years of targeting these fish and getting hooking a few and having a fight, they might slowly start to turn off or become a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
The fish I guess I've been speaking about are like almost, if you could call them, wild carp. They don't usually see too many people. They're in these back marshes that are not really, they don't have to be a boat ride away from the launch, but oftentimes, like you jump in a canoe or a stand-up paddleboard, go for a short paddle, and the only thing out there is a heron with you fishing. So I think they might just not be used to seeing people in the locations I'm targeting. But I know of all over Europe and stuff, people fish for carp in the canals and stuff, and they do use matching the hatch of bread balls. Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah. Aren't they called like boils or something like that?
If you're boilies, if you're fishing conventional gear, with corn and chum and bird, it's pretty intense. And that's huge out here. The conventional European techniques where you have bite alarms and all that kind of stuff. In fact, Ontario just legalized it this year, going forward for 2021, that you're going to be allowed to use up to 3 rods per angler while targeting carp. If you're fishing over bait. So that's the first time, because everything else is 1 rod per person unless you're down rigging. So that's kind of cool. But for the fly, I don't think you could manage 3 rods.
No. But I guess, in one sense, it's kind of good because it's promoting the fishery, right? I mean, the carp,
totally.
It's an invasive species. They have a ton of babies. There's a ton of fish.
Oh yeah. They don't struggle.
Exactly. They don't struggle. In one sense that, that is good. That the government is recognizing that, saying, hey, you know what, you want to target these, go for it. You know what?
Yep.
We support it. Guys going into the shop going, hey, I need 2 more rods now. I can do it.
Exactly.
It supports that economy. I get it. And I mean, like you said, it's to me, it's not like you're targeting 3 rods for steelhead. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's completely different, and you know what I mean.
Yep.
So it's definitely kind of cool in that regards, for sure. But back to the fly. Sure. You mentioned these patterns. You mentioned bread patterns. No, I'm not the type of guy to really try and fish a bread pattern. It's not my thing.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but would a blob or a booby, would they?
Oh my gosh! So blobs, they're like one of my favorite flies for carp. Now, I use them a little bit different than somebody in Stillwater, right? So I use them more as an opportunity, as almost like a sighter for my second fly. So I'll fish them like tandem, and my dropper will have a blob on it. Yeah. Because oftentimes when we're fishing, for the carp in my area, they're feeding on predominantly dragonflies, damselflies, mayflies, scuds, crayfish, and round gobies, which have recently entered the Great Lakes in the last 15 years and are taking off. So they're quite dull colors and oftentimes quite small. I'll be fishing a relatively big dragonfly would be like a size 8 or size 6 pattern that I would be fishing at, say, 30 or 40 feet, trying to sight fish in all of, dragonfly pattern at that is next to impossible. But what I'll do is I'll tie a dropper about 2 feet above it, 2 or 3 feet above it, with a blob on it. And you'll catch fish on blobs, totally. But more often than not, I'll cast that because you'll see the blob at 30 feet and you can strip that and think, okay, I'm about 2 feet, beyond that carp. My fly's right on his dinner plate. And that really helps. Even sometimes, because you're not going to feel the hit. They don't often rip it out of your arm, but you'll see them tilt up. The mouth will open up, similar to just, feeding a redfish or something. Yeah. So just suck it up, and then you just better just give it a shot. Give it a quick strip set. If you feel pressure, give it a harder strip set and let them go. But, there's guys that are even fishing just like glow bugs for them. So you can gink them up so they sink. There's guys that'll add fly float into them so they float. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. But I try to fish the patterns that the fish are actually eating. I like to match the hatch, so to speak, for carp.
Yeah, the naturals.
Yeah, because it makes it a little bit more, challenging in a sense. The fish that I'm targeting, they would not eat a bread ball. They're not going to eat one. They never see them. They're not going to know what it is. They're probably going to get spooked from it landing on the surface above their heads. So yeah, like my favorite patterns are all quite small and very subtle colors. I would say 8 to 12, size 8 to 12 are my standards. Yeah. Exclusion for the round goby patterns, which will go up to about a size 4 streamer hook. And those are for predatory carp, which, again, are pretty uncommon in most areas, where they will actively chase a goby or a sculpin pattern or a crayfish pattern along the bottom. And that's pretty fun. That's a pretty small percentage of our population, but once they're post-spawn and they're out on the rocky flats feeding and cruising, you can cast to pods of fish that are just cruising nice and slow. You'll watch one just slip away from the pack and chase your fly down. It's pretty fun.
I do like that. I'm kind of pumped, man. I think I actually, like, I'm hearing you talk about it. I'm like,
yep,
I need to do this. I actually,
if you walked out there with some damselfly patterns, tied on bead chain, you don't want anything too heavy. You want it to sink pretty slow. You'll probably do really well, especially if no one else is fishing for them. They're next to no pressure.
And I know, like, well, I mean, obviously you have to match the hatch. So right now would be like a blob, would be kind of time, right? Just for that Daphne, because nothing's popping off. Is
there much like living in the bottom, like in the muck all winter?
You know what there is in the canals, they're muddy bottom as opposed to the sandy beaches, right?
Yeah, the muddy bottoms, there should always be something that's crawling around.
A little gompus or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's a great idea.
A good pattern.
I think I love it.
And I even use a technique that I'm still working on. I've been using it with my clients. It's a little bit, it's similar actually, like what drop shot fishing is in conventional fishing. It's like a weight below your hook, right? Yeah. Similar in that sense for carp, I'll tie like a BB or an A size split shot about 6 inches below my fly on a tag. And I'll use something like even an olive booby pattern, and you can cast that and like kind of twitch it, and it'll just float only so far off the bottom, and you can kind of just twitch it right in their face, which is really effective. And I just crimp a split shot on there, and it's kind of fun. It's a different way of targeting. Nothing else I've ever fished like, but you'll watch them come up, a foot off bottom and just suck it up. Super fun. So gompers would be perfect, like a little floating deer hair dragonfly. Dynamite.
Well, I'm pumped, man. Like, I almost want to do this right now. Too bad I got to go.
You should go for a walk when you got the time and check it out.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, okay, all the positive stuff. I mean, let's focus, unfortunately, on the negative, and the negative being, like you said earlier, a lot of people disregard carp as a garbage fish, or is not a sport fish, or is an invasive species, which, like, let's face it, it is. Yeah, totally. But, like, they just don't regard it as a justifiable fishery. And when I say that, I mean it's not nearly as bad as it once was. Do you know what I mean? When 20 years ago when I was growing up, I mean, carp just wasn't even a conversation. For sure. But now we talk about it, and we're on this podcast talking about it. You're making a career out of it. Let's. Where do you think the shift has come from? Where do you think the focus in the shift has come from? That people are recognizing this as a potential. Yeah, go ahead.
I think a big part of it is our constant changing environment that we're living through, right? We're experiencing warmer temperatures. Our rivers are getting to the point where they're getting too warm for us to, target trout ethically, or in some areas legally. Sometimes rivers are shut down, which I wish Ontario would follow sometimes. So I think people are starting to navigate to warm water fisheries, just out of necessity, wanting to still get out in the middle of July, when our water might be in the rivers, might be in the high 60s, low 70s. And they know it's not right to target trout there. It's harmful. So getting out, maybe they started chasing, picked up a 6 or a 7 weight for smallmouth and throwing woolly buggers and catching them around here. And then all of a sudden accidentally hooking into a carp on a woolly bugger, which is a great fly for them. Don't get me wrong, catches everything. And then experiencing how much power these fish have. That's, I think, a big part of it. I don't, blame it on global warming, but I think it's something to talk about. Like, our seasons are changing, our summers are longer, our days are hotter. So I think, which is all in favor of the carp, right? So they're going to be, taking advantage of the warmer, more appropriate water temperatures for them. So And then of course, well, they are invasive, right? An invasive species is really good at finding a niche that's open and capitalizing on it. And that's part of why they're growing so fast. We do have, I think 5 or 6 years ago here where I live, there was actually a koi virus that targeted carp out in the lakes in our area. And we saw mass die-offs, like just at the beach at the end of my road. There was, hundreds of carp washing up a week that were just dead. Yeah, because it was, I can't remember, it's a type of herpes virus that transmits through any koi species during the spawn, and it was killing them. And people were like, "Oh, the carp are going to be gone." There's no way they survived that. There's, local municipalities were struggling to get rid of them. They didn't know how to take care of this amount of fish. People are leaving garbage bags full of fish at the end of their driveway. And people are like, "Yeah, they're gone. There's no way." And then we're talking 6-7 years later, and they're still here, if not more than ever. So they're a very resilient species. I think it comes down to, multiple things. They live everywhere. They're strong, like no other, in our area, if you want to fight or get a really good fight at any time of the year in warm water, even, like, they're your fish. And they're accessible. They don't require a lot of fancy gear to get started. Now, I say that, when people are getting into it, I think carp started off with conventional fishing in our area growing in popularity, and the fly guys followed suit once they realized how strong they are and that they'll eat a fly and that they're picky. It's just a good, perfect combination.
Yeah, definitely well said. I got to agree with pretty much everything you said there, especially the fact that, they are a resilient species. And I mean, the amount of money governments and local authorities are trying to eradicate them is ridiculous. And, I honestly, the spending needs to stop on that.
They're here,
in some areas. I mean, I don't know where it is, but I've always seen on social media those Asian carp, those leaping carp.
Yeah, so those are different. Yeah, Asian carp. The silver carp. They're a big one that we're seeing. I think they're seeing a lot on, like, the Mississippi region of the States, up the Mississippi River. They had, I believe, an electric barrier that was stopping the migration of them into Lake Michigan, and it was working for years until I think there was some sort of drawn out power outage, and they were actually able to get through. They've now registered them in Lake Ontario, and they are moving, and they're completely different, and maybe that's in 100 years, people are going to look at them like we do common carp right now. But for now, that's like a catch and kill. Like, if you catch one, you have to dispose of it, and you're not allowed to release them back into the water, into the system.
Is that what the rules are out where you are?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a good one for sure. Now, there's not a lot of them being caught at this point, but I do imagine in years coming, we're going to see more of them. Yeah. And if you look now, people are starting to target grass carp on the fly. Like, that's a big thing. These carp get giant. Like, they get 60, 70 pounds in some areas. Yeah. And they're fishing them on, like, deer hair on a hook that's tied in green to look like algae or like a piece of floating grass, and they're catching these fish. Right. Completely different. They're grazers. They will pick up nymphs and stuff, but these common carp, they can, not only do they nymph, but they'll chase down streamers. So they're definitely a different species altogether.
And are those the ones that also, like, they jump? Like, I'm sure you've
seen like, those videos.
The guy water skiing. It's like all these carp are jumping up
with
in
nets or something, and they're trying to catch them in the air. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, pretty wild. The commons don't do that.
No.
They're pretty spooky.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And no, I definitely like that. So, let's talk about the guiding. So, you take your clients out, typical day, you're out guiding.
Yep.
What are some effective ways that you're putting your clients on these fish?
Cool.
Like, where do you start?
Yeah, I'll definitely start from the beginning of this. We've talked about gear already, and then it's going to be location, right? So you definitely want to make sure you're fishing in water that's ankle to waist deep, something that you can let your relatively lightweight fly sink down fairly quickly. You're going to have opportunities, and they're not going to present themselves forever. You need to make your shots count. So oftentimes we're over a weedy or a mucky, like a marl bottom. It's often you're walking through it. You might be over your wading boots in kind of a mucky bottom, but that's where all these invertebrates live, and these fish are just rooting around and they're feeding. We will often fish, especially post spawn, out over gravel bottoms for fish feeding on, like I said, the sculpins, gobies, and crayfish. But a lot of my fishing happens pre-spawn and then just after the spawn. Post-spawn, once the water really heats up, they do prefer cooler water. A lot of people think these fish like 80-degree water. It's not the case. They're going to move out of that warm stuff and they're going to move out to the deeper water where they're just not accessible to a fly angler. You need to see them. I won't cast unless I see a fish. So it's 100% sight fishing, which is completely different than most of the lake fishing we do around here and in general. You're walking with your clients really slow. If you're going out on your own, walk slow. And every time you take a step, I like to tell them to confirm that there's not a fish in front of you. Like, take the time to be able to say, there's no fish here, don't rush it. They'll often, if you can see them at a distance, don't try casting at them at 50 feet away. If you can get into 20 or 15 feet, if you can get in close, it's less line on the water, much higher percentage of them eating. Approaching them or just walking in general, just don't drag your feet. That's the number one thing I see, and see them kicking up big dust clouds behind you. Take a step, look around left to right, do a full scan, take another step, and really work the water. When we're looking for fish, there's kind of a specific type of fish you want to target, and there's ones you definitely don't want to target. When you see carp that are swimming like in a direction, they're moving quick. They could be in groups, they could be single. Those fish are moving from point A to B. For whatever reason, maybe they're moving from deep water to shallow or shallow to deep, whatever it was, but those fish aren't feeding. You can cast to them all day and they're not going to take your fly. You're just going to spend your day chasing fish that aren't feeding. However, it's not a bad idea to keep an eye on where they go, because oftentimes they're going to be moving to a group of fish that could be actively feeding. Just like I used a technique in June, end of May, early June, when the kind of the peak of our carp spawn in this area, a spawning carp will not feed. You can put bait in front of their mouth and they're not going to eat. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say 100%, they're not going to eat, but most of them will not eat. Yeah, their minds are set on one thing and that's it. And then a lot of people stop fishing for them during the spawn. But one thing I've noticed, through trout fishing and steelheading and in our rivers and stuff, or lake run rainbows, not all fish spawn at once, right? So that would be, kind of silly to think that. So if you find spawning fish, just watch where they are, because you'll see them splashing. Like, they're not shy spawners. You could see them from 100 yards away. You'll see the bulrushes moving and splashing and fish jumping out of the water. They're very active spawners, and they'll spawn in large groups, sometimes hundreds of fish. But if you approach that area slowly and just keep your eyes on the edges, you'll often find fish that are just staging to spawn, that are still feeding, or ones that are already post-spawn and they're starting to become quite aggressive. So for those fish, don't cast at fish that are moving really fast. Don't cast at fish. Don't waste time casting at fish that are actively spawning. Try to find fish that are moving slow. Again, singles, doubles, or small groups. They might not look like they're actively feeding. Like, they're not going to be like a school of bonefish with their noses down and tails out of the water all the time. Although that does happen. Majority of the time, they're going to be moving quite slow, like a slow walking pace. Just cruising these muddy flats, looking to, spook out a crayfish or spook out a damselfly or dragonfly. And then you'll see them lunge forward and grab it. The other one that you want to look for is fish that are sitting still. And it kind of goes against that previous theory where they're roaming the flats and looking for active food. They are a bit of a lion weight predator. So similar to like a bass would be in our area, or a pike, something like that. They'll sit in a location that provides them cover, whether it's under weeds or against the rocks, and wait for something to come by. And if you can put a fly, within 6 to 8 inches of their face there, I would almost say 7 out of 10 times that fish is actually going to take. Fish that are sitting still are probably my favorite fish to target. Because you can get right up to them. You can walk in from behind at their blind spot, approach from the tail, and drop that fly right on their dinner plate. And oftentimes you'll get an eat. Once you do hook a fish, like we mentioned before, clear your line. Like, line management is key. As a guide, I often stand over their non-casting shoulder, or whatever way the predominant wind is, and I'll help manage their line for them when they're casting. If they, sometimes we'll use stripping baskets, but sometimes the weeds are just so heavy it's awkward to manage a stripping basket. So I'll just help manage the line for them. When a fish takes, make sure you're not stepping on your line. Yeah. That's the number one way to break off one of these fish. You want to put them on the reel stripping them, you're going to get some crazy line burn. I mean, it's a kind of a nice badge of honor to wear maybe at the end of the day, but it hurts. And it's not as effective, right? You don't have all the pressure that your reel can apply to tire these fish out, specifically with a reel with a nice drag. And then it's all about, playing the low rod angles, and waiting to get them in. I see a lot of rods break when people are solo carping, when they try to land them by themselves at the very end of the fight, when the fish isn't quite done. People are used to fishing for salmonids and they try to tail them, and they've got a nice little wrist to grab, right? On their tail, they're gonna be quite good. Carp don't have that. You tail them and the tail just collapses and they're gonna take off again. So
what do you mean the tail collapses? Whoa. What do you mean?
So, like if you were like a tail of Chinook, right? Yeah. Like the tail is quite rigid. It's not going to go anywhere. You give you a good handshake, and if you hold on tight enough, you're going to be able to manage that fish if it's quite tired. Carp, you try to tail them on the caudal fin, the tail will actually just collapse. Like it doesn't have a rigid tail at all. So it's soft, right? You grab the tail, like the meat at the caudal peduncle, right, where it meets like the wrist of the tail, is fine. You can grab that, but there's nothing to stop that tail from sliding through your hands, because the top and the bottom of the tail will just fold flat, and away it goes. Wow. So they can be quite challenging, right? And they don't have, I'm not a proponent of holding fish by the gill or landing them by the gill. No. It's really hard to do that anyways. They don't have much of a gill to grab. So there's two options. My number one is I always have a net. I have it tucked into my waders. I use like a salmon steelhead wading net, something that's quite large because these fish do get quite big. Yeah. And if you don't bring a net, bringing them up into shallow water, not beaching them. You don't want to get them up in the sand and covered in rocks and stuff. It's bad for them and their protective slime and all that. But getting them up into shallow, weedy water where they're not able to sit upright anymore and they have to lay on their side, and then get a hand under their belly. If you get a hand under their belly and if you hold them forward, just behind the gills with the pectoral fins, kind of braced against your thumb and maybe your index finger.
Okay.
Like you're cradling them. Yeah. Their pectoral fins don't really fold forward that much, and it actually gives you quite a good area to hold on to. And then I just drop my rod in the water. Then I'll put my hand on the tail to stop them from being able to kick and all that. That's landing. What
about retrieving your fly from them? Because they have a sucker
soft mouth.
Yeah, sucker soft mouth. Is it go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. So their mouths take a hook really well. That's one good thing. Mm-hmm. They're not soft in the sense like a whitefish or something that we have here, or a black crappie in our area that you can, they call them paper mouths. You rip the hook right out of their mouth if you fight them too hard. Mm-hmm. Their mouths are soft and blubbery, but they really do hold on to a hook quite well. I often use quite large, extra heavy or 2X or 3X heavy hooks because of their size, and they just take the hook really well. However, I do fish barbless flies for them because the barb will get stuck in them so much, and you're kind of pulling against blubber, right? It's really hard to get a hook out. And in Ontario, we don't have barbless regulations, excluding some of our trout water. So you could fish a barb fly for them here. Okay. But I highly recommend, even if you're allowed to fish with barbs, pinch your barbs. You don't need them. You're not going to lose any more fish, especially if you have a strong hook. But removing it makes it a lot easier. The great thing about these is with flies is they don't have any scent or taste, right? So these carp are very fast at realizing that's not food, and they'll spit them out really fast. So if you don't react quick enough, they're just going to spit your hook out. And surprising how they don't get hooked. Like, it's quite unbelievable. So, but still, most times your fly is quite within reach. You can remove it with your fingers, because by the time you strip set or set the hook, they've probably already started to spit it out. Very rarely do I even have to go in with forceps or anything to get them out. Okay. They're quite easy to remove once you land them.
Okay. Interesting.
And then try to keep them wet, keep their head in the water. Keep it. That's why I like a net. I have a big, I don't know what it is, maybe a 24 or 25 inch hoop net. Something you can scoop them up in, keep them in the water. They're under control. If you get a 20 pounder or something, even though it's landed and it's tired, it's still got a lot of strength. And trying to hold up that fish for a photo and all that kind of stuff can be quite tiring. So let it tire itself out the last little bit in the net, instead of trying to just beat it, fight it to death. So it's all not going to, so it's so tired that it's easy to land. And that's your best friend.
Okay. So what was I going to ask you? So basically what's like ideal carp water conditions?
Yeah, great question. So similar to what you would experience if you've gone down, down to fish for saltwater in the Gulf or something like that. You want sunny days. That's actually really key. As long as you manage your shadow, like that's super important. You need to be able to see these fish. Low wind, depending on the size of your water body. If you're fishing in a river that's relatively slow moving river that's sheltered from the wind, then you can fish in a higher wind for sure. But out in an open lake, I like winds that are as close to zero as possible in kilometers. Having a little ripple is not a bad thing, specifically if you're not the most accurate caster. You're not going to just spook them as easy, but you do need to see them. And then the approach is super important. You're approaching with the sun at your back. You will cast your shadow forward, but that's going to allow you to see with polarized sunglasses a lot further instead of looking into the glare of the sun. That's a good way to approach. So depending on the time of the day, I'll walk into the water with people, or even if I'm fishing on my own from a specific location, making sure the sun's at my back.
Interesting. Okay. Like it. So what about cooler temperatures? Like say targeting them in cooler temperatures. Is there any different techniques or any way that you want to switch it up?
Definitely. So we fish them pre-spawn here too. Like I don't fish them like when the ice is off, when the ice has just come off. Like I'll probably wait for us maybe April to start targeting them. It's hard to do that because that's a lot of people. That's when our trout opener is, and a lot of people want to get out trout fishing. But you can probably start catching them in like late April, early May. That's when the water warms up just enough, maybe into the high 40s, low 50s, where they've moved up out of their wintering locations, which is often the deepest area of the lake, just due to the warmest water being in the deepest areas, coming up to start, feeding, start thinking about the spawn. In the cold water, they're much slower moving, just like most species are. And they do want your fly to really just kind of be a very slow fall. Often I'll use unweighted flies or a fly with, just single, small or extra small bead chain, just to give it, to orientate the hook point so it's up, so it's not snagging in the bottom for me. And making sure that you give them time to see your fly. Like they'll come over and they'll investigate. You'll often see them come and then they'll tilt up. And a lot of people then set the hook because they see them tilt up and their tail may break the surface or thinking they fed. Really wait for that mouth to extend and suck it in. Oftentimes you'll see their mouth open. It's a nice bright white mouth. And you can see that vacuum kind of do its job. And then that's when you want to connect. But in the cold water, slow it down, fish smaller patterns. Think, what's moving that time of year. Oftentimes in the spring, we have in the lake around me, Georgian Bay on Lake Huron, we have a large population of emerald shiners, and they come up shallow in the spring, often to spawn, and carp will feed on these shiners. So it's weird seeing a carp, but everyone associates with a bottom feeder, sucking in minnows in schools, right? So fishing like a small zonker pattern will work. We've fished really, really slow, maybe even on the intermediate line just to get it down and then just strip right along the bottom is quite effective, as well as fishing the smallest little mayfly nymphs or damselfly nymphs.
Cool. Yeah.
Even like a squirmy worm. I hate saying it, but like even a squirmy worm is just deadly for them. That slow movement, it gives them time to look at it. It just, that material just moves with the slightest little current variation. Yeah. And they're on it. Yeah.
Sweet. You know what? You got me pumped. I'm gonna try this, audience. I'm gonna try this.
It's amazing. So I'm looking forward to hear how you do.
I'm gonna try this. If I'm successful, I'll definitely give you the credit on that for teaching me about that. Well. Cool. Especially out here, we have such an abundance of unfortunately, but fortunately, we have such an abundance of it. And I'm looking at it, going, why not try it? There's times out here in these high mountain lakes and stuff like that where the water temperature gets too high because we are in a desert in Canada. Yeah, I know it sounds contradictory. But it gets 40 degrees, so it's quite hot, which is 100 in the States. So we don't like to fish for the trout then, right? I mean, it's just terrible. So hitting the carp during those times, like you said, the sunny days, the no wind, you know what I mean? That is prime
peak of
time.
Summer.
Yeah, peak of summer. Yeah. You still want to be out on the water. You have access. We have access still water wise and boat wise and all that sort of stuff. Yep. So it works.
They get more difficult as the water temps do increase. Like once they get into the high 60s, low 70s, they start to become quite challenging. But that's fun. My favorite time is that low 60s, high 50s water temp when they're feeding heavy. yeah, I mean, it sounds like a great area to target them. Like a lot of people, it doesn't seem like a lot of people fish for them there. So that's
we are
all the
spoiled
better.
out here in BC with
Definitely.
And to be honest, I mean, a lot of guys, you know, during those times, the July and August, I mean, when we got the salmon running in the ocean, right? So a lot of guys will target that, right? But if you don't live near the ocean, I mean, this is the next best thing, right? So for definitely, I'm pumped. I'm going to try it. I definitely want to. If someone wanted to learn more about carp, reach out to you, figure carp out, talk carp with you. I mean, you know so much about it. How could they do that? Where could they do that if they wanted to book a guide trip with you? Like,
sure.
Walk us through where they could find you at.
Yeah, but probably the best way to get in touch with me, as a lot of people nowadays, is just through social media. Pretty active on Instagram. My handle there is matt.martin.fishing. Send me a message. We can link up. I'm happy to share, techniques, go over some more of the stuff we talked about on the podcast. And if you are interested in, booking a guided carp day, I'm happy to take you out. The one great thing too about Ontario here is we're fishing for these carp is there's so many other species that you can experience while you're out fishing for carp. My clients will keep a rod rigged for carp in their hands, and I've got a 10 weight rigged up with a pike fly for them for, a giant pike that might swim by, or there might be, great smallmouth that just start to show up and pull up on the reef. And it's like, here's a popper, cast it out, it's pretty amazing. We even have other coarse fish like gar, and catching gar is like, they jump like crazy. They might not be the strongest fish, but it's just a cool looking fish too. Right. So there's a lot that you can target. Just keeping your eyes open. That's the best thing. It's so multi-species, even if you're targeting carp.
Well, if I ever go to visit some family out in that area, I'm gonna have to give you a shout, and we'll have to go get some
definitely
some carp, some gar, make it happen. I'm looking for that. So, I definitely want to thank you, and listeners, I definitely want to thank you as well. And like always, I will see you guys next week.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the opportunity to chat with you tonight. It's been fun.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Matt. Okay. You've been listening to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, tell us by liking this episode and subscribing to the show. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. See you next week.